In today's episode, we'll delve into the intricate details and speculations surrounding Luffy's battle with Kizaru during the climax of One Piece. The face-off between Luffy and Kizaru in Chapter 1091 is a rematch from their previous encounter 2 years ago at Sabaody Archipelago, where Luffy was utterly defeated. Now, having reached the stature of the Four Emperors, how much of Luffy's strength will hold up against Kizaru? Let's dissect that. To all the One Piece enthusiasts out there, I'd love to hear your thoughts and theories on this topic. If you enjoyed this analysis, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. And hey, if there's a scene or episode I missed covering, drop it in the comments below. Heads up, this video will contain spoilers up to Chapter 1090. Alright, let's dive in. Before we dive deep into Luffy's battle with Kizaru, let's recap the current tumultuous situation in Egghead. Within the initiation of battles against Lucci and Kizaru, and Sentomaru's defeat, the pacifistas protecting Egghead have fallen into the Navy's hands. Given this backdrop, Chapter 1091 presents a dire situation for the Straw Hat crew and the Vegapunk faction. The only way for Luffy and his crew to come out on top is to escape Egghead with Vegapunk. Currently, excluding the traitor York, we have 4 Vegapunks alive: Stella, Lilith, Edison, and Atlas. Satellite is just a clone designed to assist Stella, so as long as she safely escapes Egghead, there's no issue. The absolute worst case scenario? Complete annihilation and capture by the Navy. On the flip side, the Navy and world government's victory hinges on 3 conditions: securing the power plant and Punk Hazard, capturing York, and assassinating Vegapunk. Their nightmare? Failing to meet even one of these 3 conditions. Especially if they let Stella escape. They'd be at odds with the world's greatest mind, so the world government must secure Vegapunk at any cost. Speaking of the Navy and world government's current strength, they boast 30,000 naval officers, 9 vice admirals, Kizaru, Lucci, dozens of pacifista Mark IIIs, and the powerful, though unpredictable, Saint Satum. In contrast, the Straw Hat crew and Vegapunk faction are at a disadvantage, with Sentomaru defeated by Kizaru, and Stussy likely severely injured from shielding Stella from Lucci's attack. This leaves just the Straw Hat crew, the 4 Vegapunks, and Bonnie. The truth is, there's a massive power gap between Luffy's crew and the Navy world government. If Luffy were to unleash his Conqueror's Haki, like he did in Fishman Island, he could potentially reduce their numbers significantly. However, it probably won't affect the non-human pacifistas. Additionally, in Film Red's climax, Vice Admiral Momonga kneeled due to Shank's Conqueror's Haki, but didn't faint. So, it's unlikely that even Luffy's Conqueror's Haki would make powerhouses like the Vice Admirals pass out. Meaning, if it comes down to a head-on collision with the Navy and pacifistas, the odds for the Straw Hats look grim. Once the barrier of the Frontier Dome is deactivated, the Navy and pacifistas likely waiting in the pavilion phase below will rush upwards. Before that happens, Luffy and his crew must escape from Egghead. Speed and preparation are crucial for this escape. And the biggest obstacle, Kizaru, must be incapacitated before the barrier deactivation. In other words, Luffy must win against Kizaru in a short span. Before we delve into the anticipated showdown between Luffy and Kizaru, it's crucial to understand the abilities of both fighters as a premise. Firstly, regarding Luffy's powers. In his battle against Kaido, Luffy awakened the human-human fruit model, Nika, and emerged victorious against Kaido, often hailed as the strongest creature. However, Luffy will likely rely on his typical powers and Haki-infused blows in this battle. The awakening of his abilities has made Luffy's new form, Gear 5, incredibly potent, as evident from his battles against Kaido and Lucci. But there's a significant flaw in Gear 5, a time constraint. After its use, Luffy rapidly ages, rendering him powerless. Pushing Gear 5 to its absolute limit could leave Luffy aged mid-battle, sealing his defeat. During the Kaido battle, Luffy managed to activate Gear 5 again after aging, driven by sheer will and the intense desire to save Wano and meet his crew and the samurai's expectations. Hence, without the emotional weight from the Onigashima raid, it's unlikely that Luffy can consecutively use Gear 5 against Kizaru. Furthermore, they must defeat Kizaru and make their escape in a limited time frame. Meaning, in the impending battle against Kizaru, Luffy has only one chance with his time-limited Gear 5. In his fight against Lucci, he aged not during the attack phase, but after deactivation. Still, even after returning to his standard form, Luffy seemed utterly exhausted from merely running around the lab. Considering he attacked Kaido about 10 times before reaching his limit, it seems the Gear 5's limitations aren't as straightforward. A rough estimate suggests Luffy can attack about 15 to 20 times in Gear 5 mode at most. In simpler terms, once Luffy activates Gear 5, he needs to defeat Kizaru swiftly. Next up, let's discuss Kizaru's abilities. There's a high likelihood that Kizaru's glint fruit is awakened. After the war at Marineford 2 years ago, the climate of Punk Hazard, where Aokiji and Akainu battled, remains altered. Typically, Logia-type devil fruits temporarily affect the weather. If Punk Hazard's climate continues to be influenced by the magma and ice fruits, it's conceivable that it's an effect of awakened Logia-type devil fruits. Therefore, if Aokiji and Akainu have awakened their abilities, Kizaru, being on par with them, might also have his glint fruit awakened. But what could the awakened glint fruit's ability be? As speculated earlier, an awakened Logia type might impact the weather permanently. Thus, an area affected by the awakened glint fruit might never experience night, turning it into a perpetual day zone. Eni's lobby, known as the Never Night Island, could have been affected by an awakened glint fruit, preventing the arrival of night. If Kizaru uses this awakened ability during his fight with Luffy, Egghead might also become a Never Night Zone. Still, this power seems pale in comparison to the devastating effects of the awakened magma and ice fruits, and it doesn't seem to offer any direct combat advantage. On the other hand, Paramecia-type awakenings can either simply grant the user the ability to bestow their power's properties onto the surroundings, like the string and rumble fruits, or have more intricate effects like the op fruit. Therefore, the awakened glint fruit might not only influence the weather, but also enhance its abilities. An example could be managing light that can pass through substances. As we know, Kizaru's lasers are light, but there are types of light, like the X-rays used in radiography, which can penetrate low-density materials. With awakening, Kizaru might be able to harness such light. In summary, considering Luffy's time limit with Gear 5, he must defeat Kizaru quickly. Meanwhile, Kizaru might have an awakened glint fruit, potentially impacting the environment with newfound light abilities, and possibly even manipulating light that can penetrate substances. Regardless of the direction it takes, Kizaru's light abilities have likely become significantly stronger. In today's segment, we'll explore Luffy's battle against Kizaru, keeping these premises in mind. Luffy's preemptive strike marks the beginning of his duel with Kizaru after 2 long years. The initial kick, imbued with Conqueror's Haki, shows Luffy is giving it his all this time. But while Luffy went full throttle with Gear 5 in Chapter 1069 against Lucci, he isn't using it against Kizaru, a more formidable opponent. It seems Luffy is considering the repercussions of Gear 5. In the battle against Kaido, being his first time using Gear 5, Luffy seemed high on adrenaline, fighting on sheer instinct. However, in his second battle using Gear 5 against Lucci, he appeared much more composed, likely realizing the strain Gear 5 places on his body. Luffy's decision to confront Seraphim, who attacked on York's orders using Gear 4 instead of Gear 5, underscores his understanding of the backlash from Gear 5 and his newfound ability to decide when to deploy it, based on the opponent and situation. Meanwhile, Kizaru hasn't used his awakened abilities, even when he faced off against Rayleigh at Sabaudi Archipelago 2 years ago, who was on par with him. This suggests Kizaru generally refrains from using his awakened skills. Notably, not just Luffy's Gear 5, but even Kid and Law held back their awakened techniques until the climax of the Onigashima raid. The heavy toll of using awakened skills probably makes them a last resort. As the battle commences, Luffy might refrain from the heavily exhausting Gear 4 or 5, and instead unleash attacks cloaked in Conqueror's Haki. Kizaru, recalling his battles at Sabaudi Archipelago and against Sentomaru, will likely respond with long-range laser strikes and leverage his light-speed movements. Kizaru's ability to move at the speed of light is formidable, but Luffy, now clad in armament Haki, can touch and hurt Logia users like Kizaru. Moreover, as Kaido mentioned, Luffy can now wrap his attacks in Conqueror's Haki, making his blows even more potent than Kizaru's. While Kizaru might have the upper hand in speed, Luffy can close in on him in an instant, landing powerful kicks. Considering all these factors, the initial stages of the battle will likely be evenly matched. Luffy, who was no match for Kizaru 2 years ago, will now demonstrate to both Kizaru and the readers his growth over the years. As the evenly matched battle between Luffy and Kizaru unfolds, it's essential to note that Luffy's primary goal is escaping Egghead, not prolonging the fight with Kizaru. As Monkey D. Luffy once declared, "Kizaru, we're 100 times stronger than 2 years ago." Going by his words in chapter 1091, to prove he's become 100 times stronger, Luffy will undoubtedly shift into Gear 5. With this mode, he can grant the properties of rubber to others, allowing him to deflect attacks like Kaido's Bolo Breath. Observations from the battle against Kaido suggest enhancements in speed and power when Luffy is in Gear 5. Coupled with the toughening from his Zone Awakening, Luffy is more resilient. Kizaru, known for his laser strikes from a distance and quickly closing in for an attack, might face challenges. His light speed attacks can now be countered, and even if they land, the damage inflicted on Luffy, who's become tougher, might be minimal. Given the situation, it's plausible that Kizaru would resort to using his awakened abilities to counter Gear 5. If, as speculated earlier, the awakened Glint fruit allows Kizaru to emit light that can pass through rubber, Luffy won't be able to deflect or block his lasers. Moreover, being light, Kizaru can freely move inside the Frontier's dome barrier. In contrast, Luffy, upon contact with the barrier, will be injured, limiting his movement. Additionally, the lab phase where Luffy currently is houses the lab with his crew and the essential Vega Force 1 and Sunny ship, objects that he cannot afford to damage. Comparing the present battle to the one against Kaido, where they had a vast space up in the clouds, Luffy faces multiple constraints now, making a free-flowing battle embodying Nika quite challenging. Furthermore, he can't deploy colossal moves like the Gum Gum Bajrang gun, which took down Kaido. Thus, the battle's mid-stage will likely see Luffy grappling with the awakened abilities of Kizaru and other constraints, facing significant challenges. In the saga of Egghead, Luffy and his crew's ultimate aim isn't necessarily to defeat Kizaru, but to escape from Egghead. Drawing parallels from their past escapades, like the escapes from Enies Lobby and Whole Cake Island, it's evident that they need to subdue Kizaru to facilitate their exit. After Kizaru's defeat, it's unlikely that the Frontier Dome's barrier would just deactivate, allowing a seamless escape. Instead, the escape would likely be a nail-biting last-minute ordeal. There's speculation that Dr. Vegapunk might deactivate the Frontier Dome's barrier before Luffy and Kizaru's showdown reaches its climax. Such a move would ease Luffy's constraints, who's been handicapped by the barrier. Once it's down, the battle could shift from the confined lab phase, which houses the critical Punk recourse above, to a more expansive battleground. This would probably lead the fight to the pavilion phase, where there's no need to worry about damaging Punk recourse. Here, Luffy would be free to unleash his grand moves. The final moments of the battle are anticipated to be a clash of titanic moves between Luffy and Kizaru. Intriguingly, Kizaru hasn't showcased a definitive grand move yet, and Luffy, to avoid causing damage to Egghead, can't use his Bajrang gun. This might set the stage for a clash of new techniques. Kizaru's current 3 techniques are named after the 3 sacred treasures found in Japanese mythology, right? It's speculated that his new techniques will also be named after legends from Japanese mythology. A potential example could be an attack symbolizing the descent of Ninigi no Mikoto from the heavens to Mount Takachiho, bearing the 3 sacred treasures gifted by the sun goddess Amaterasu. This could be named after the legendary event Tensen Korin, or Descent of the Heavenly Grandchild. As the epic clash of grand moves between Luffy and Kizaru unfolds, Luffy is anticipated to triumph, but only by a hair's breadth. The primary objective this time is to escape from Egghead. Considering that none of the enemies Luffy has defeated so far have died, there's a high likelihood that Kizaru will also survive. With Kizaru defeated and the Frontier Dome's barrier deactivated, one might assume that the Straw Hat crew, along with Vegapunk, can now make a smooth exit from the Egghead. But there's still an unresolved issue: Luffy's rapid aging. Given that even the brief skirmish with Lucci led to Luffy aging, the grueling battle against Kizaru would surely exacerbate it. If the barrier goes down, they'd need to evacuate before Marines and the pacifistas from the pavilion phase ascend. There's no luxury of time to wait for Luffy to recover. Therefore, during the escape from Enies lobby, even though Luffy defeated Lucci, he couldn't move. Robin rolled him into the sea. Similarly, this time it's expected that someone will manage to rescue Luffy when he becomes immobilized. If Luffy collapses in the pavilion phase, there's also a possibility of rescuing a critically injured Sentomaru, who might have suffered a crushing defeat against Kizaru. That's all for today. This channel posts summaries, explanations, and ranking videos related to One Piece. If you like One Piece, we would be happy if you could support us by subscribing to our channel and commenting. Thank you for watching till the end. See you in the next video.